Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a dynamic that, let's be honest, pretty much all of us have either witnessed or been on the receiving end of at some point. We're going to break down the exact anatomy of emotional withdrawal, specifically the silent treatment. Now, the source text we're looking at today takes a really meticulous, empathetic, but highly analytical approach to this. It's a heavy topic, sure, but figuring out the precise nuts and bolts of how this behavior actually works, it's incredibly empowering. Okay, let's just dive right into it. The source text drops a massive truth bomb right out of the gate. This isn't cooling off. You know how we always tend to excuse that icy silence after an argument, right? We say, oh, they just need a minute to collect their thoughts. Well, our material today tells us to completely throw that assumption out the window. We are dropping straight into the core tension here, completely challenging what we think post-argument silence actually represents. So, that brings us to Section 1, the illusion of space, or as the text so brilliantly puts it, punishment disguised as space. What often looks like taking some necessary room to breathe, which, by the way, is a completely normal human need, is actually, according to the research, a highly calculated disguise. Let's look at the contrast here. On the one hand, you've got cooling off. That's a healthy interpersonal move. It's stepping back just to regulate your own emotions. But then, on the other hand, you have punishment disguised as space. The source material explicitly drops the silent treatment into this second bucket. It's absolutely crucial to spot the difference because even though they might look identical on the surface, the intent and the impact are literally worlds apart. All right, moving on to Section 2, the anatomy of emotional withdrawal, the mechanisms of control. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it completely flips our perspective. We're going from seeing silence as just a passive absence of words to seeing it as an active deployed tool. Let's anchor this with the exact definition from the text. Emotional withdrawal is the act of using silence as a form of interpersonal control rather than a period of cooling off. Look closely at that phrasing. It's an act. It's not a lack of emotion, and it's not just running out of things to say. It's a control mechanism, actively wedged right into the space between two people. And the text breaks down exactly what this weaponized silence does to the person on the receiving end. It kicks off this highly specific three-step psychological cascade. Step 1, it triggers anxiety. Step 2, it forces you to chase. And Step 3, it makes you apologize, even if you're not wrong. Let's really unpack this chain reaction, because honestly, recognizing this momentum is the only way to see the trap. So, Step 1, it triggers anxiety. Just think about that sudden, heavy silence for a second. The text points out that this abrupt withdrawal doesn't just annoy you, it is deeply, profoundly anxiety-inducing. When communication is just completely severed without any mutual agreement, it creates this massive void of uncertainty. And for the person on the receiving end, that silence doesn't feel quiet at all. It feels incredibly loud and fundamentally unsettling. Which leads us perfectly into Step 2. It forces you to chase. See, because that anxiety from Step 1 is so unbearable, basic human nature kicks in. You just want to make it stop. The source material notes that this silence actually forces the victim into a dynamic of pursuit. You reach out, you try to fix things, you desperately try to bridge the gap. And the wild part? By literally doing nothing, the person giving the silent treatment has successfully turned you into the pursuer. They've shifted the entire power dynamic without lifting a finger. And finally, we hit Step 3. It makes you apologize, even if you're not wrong. This right here is where the control is completely realized. The source points out that the anxiety, combined with the sheer exhaustion of the chase, gets so overwhelming that the victim will just swallow unearned blame. You'll literally say, I'm sorry, just to turn the lights back on in the relationship, just to make the punishment stop. The mechanism has worked flawlessly. Which brings us to Section 3, weapon versus boundary, redefining the silence. So the crucial point, based on the breakdown we just went through, is that we really need a paradigm shift. Look at this dichotomy, boundary versus weapon. A healthy emotional boundary is protective, right? It's there to keep you safe from harm and to ensure you have the space you need. But a weapon? A weapon is offensive. It's explicitly designed to inflict discomfort, to control, and to manipulate another person's behavior. The text demands that we absolutely stop confusing the two. The source material crystallizes all of this with one profound, definitive statement. Silence becomes a weapon, not a boundary. I really want you to process that for a second. There is an absolute fundamental difference between protecting yourself and punishing someone else. When silence is being used to trigger your anxiety and force you to chase them, that is no longer a boundary. That is interpersonal combat. All right, entering our final section now, the ultimate red flag. How to identify the weapon. And this brilliantly illustrates a concrete litmus test from the text. It explicitly states, red flag, communication stops only when you disagree or assert yourself. The timing of the silence here is the ultimate giveaway. Think about it. If someone is perfectly chatty and communicative when you're compliant, but the second you express a different opinion or stand up for your own needs, a massive wall comes down, yeah, no, that is not them needing space to cool off. That conditionality exposes the silence for exactly what it is, a weapon used to drag you right back into line. I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought based on everything we've unpacked today. Is the silence in your life a boundary or a weapon? I highly encourage you to take this framework from the explainer, hold it up to the interpersonal dynamics around you, and answer that question honestly. Because understanding the anatomy of emotional withdrawal, that is step one to breaking its spell entirely. Thanks for joining me on this one, and as always, keep learning.